And I've been using Logic for over a decade now, and Logic is still my favorite DAW for creating electronic music. So in these next few videos, I'll demonstrate some really cool atypical things that you can do with MIDI in Logic using Logic's Scripter plugin. And don't worry, no coding is going to be necessary for any of these videos. So in this first video, I'm going to demonstrate how you can create random generated music, well, mostly random generated music, using a few key Scripter presets to generate the MIDI data, and some carefully placed effects for some nice sound design. So first, let me give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So you'll notice that for my keyboard and my drums here, there's no region on the track, and that's because both of these channels are automatically randomly generating music without any MIDI region triggering the instruments to play. Now with the bass, I've sort of started with a really basic bass line, and then I'm applying some random generated elements to it. So let's start from scratch. I've got the vintage electric piano pulled up on a track here with no effects whatsoever. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the Scripter plugin as one of my MIDI effects inserts. Now for this first Scripter plugin, I'm going to use a preset called the Drum Probability Sequencer. So even though it says Drum Probability Sequencer, you don't have to use this just on drums. Essentially, this allows you to determine the probability of each voice and each step in a sequence being triggered. So when a step is at 100%, that step, that note is always going to appear. It's always going to play. If you pull it down at 0, it's never going to appear. It's never going to play. Basically, you have your first voice here. You can turn it on or off. So I'll set this to C3. And then for each voice, you have 16 steps that are kind of broken up here. So this is the first step. This is the last step. And think of each step as like a 16th note. So if I turn off voice 2, voice 3, and voice 4, and I set the steps to every fourth step, essentially I'm going to get that note on every downbeat. And then you can pull in other steps or pull in the probability of other steps occurring. And in order to trigger the notes to play, you just press the space bar. So off screen, I picked 4 notes that are all within the key of C minor. So C, G sharp or A flat, D sharp or E flat, and A sharp or B flat. So I'll turn on each of these voices and then press play to see what I've got. So it's pretty easy to randomly generate notes, but I want to do something a little bit different with the sound design to actually make it sound pleasing sounding. So I've got Valhalla Shimmer up here. It's a really nice reverb for sound design, for making really ambient sounds. So I went through and made some of these sounds a bit more sparse. Next, I'm going to load up a second Scripter plugin, and the preset for this is called Random Offset Probability. What this allows you to do is set a probability for something different happening for each note. So if I say there's a 100% probability that the octave is going to be offset in an upward direction or a downward direction, or the semitones are going to be offset, every single note will be altered from its original state to something else. But if I put this, say, like around 40%, now there's just a 40% chance that each note will be shifted upward an octave, downward an octave, or I can set a semitone value as well. I'm going to set the high octave to just 1 octave up and the semitone offset to 7 semitones. So there's a 40% chance that my notes will be altered in one of these 3 ways or a combination of these 3 ways. So here I'm randomly generating a drum pattern with the drum probability sequencer, which is its original intended purpose, but it can be really adapted to anything. And to tie all this together, I have a really basic bass line here coming from RetroSynth. But to give this some randomness, I'm going to add the arpeggiator. I have this rhythm I've pulled up here in advance. Now that sounds fine on its own, but there's nothing really random about it. So we can give this some random element by adding a scripter plugin called the probability gate. What this does is it just determines the probability of a note occurring. So if I pull this down, there'll be less of a chance that the notes occur. And if I pull up the probability, there'll be a higher chance that the notes occur. And if you want to further randomize the bass line, you can add the random offset probability to this as well to set a probability that the notes will be altered in some way. And then to give it a bit of ambience and a bit of rhythmic motion, I'll add in the stereo delay as well, just to give my bass line some echo. So that's how you can create random generated music in Logic. You can experiment with different instruments, different probabilities, and get different interesting results each time.